Hi everyone. Happy Thursday, February 6th, 2025. And today I want to talk about this idea that no one is indispensable, especially at work. And that's the specific area that I'm going to focus on, being the notion of not being indispensable in your organization, in your company, at work. And so, what does indispensable mean? Well, indispensable is something that is absolutely necessary. You can't live without it. If an organization lost an employee, then the organization would crumble without that person managing the company because they were very skilled and knowledgeable. Um, but that's not the case. The truth of the matter is, and at least for America, and I'm going to say this as it sounds like a criticism to capitalism. And yes, I am to a certain extent criticizing capitalism because I feel like although the ideology itself is not evil, and if it were used and implemented into our government and into our society in a more equitable way, I think it would be a really good system that would work. And you see capitalism everywhere around the world. You see it in places that have totalitarian regimes where they still have the black market. And there are, hidden forms of capitalism even in countries that have a complete authoritative regime. But anyway, this is me criticizing capitalism, the bad capitalism, what it's morphed into, what the extreme of it. And so I am going to say that in this capitalistic society that we live in, at least in America, employees are seen as disposable. I mean, you see that with the Amazon company, how Bezos treats his employees, how I had a professor when I was doing my master's degree, and he was into labor and migration. He studied that, and he just studied how the insidious way that Amazon treats its workers. It's just insane, and the amount of labor regulations that don't exist is, I mean, for a man that has billions and billions of dollars, to not treat his employees that gave him that wealth, because if it weren't for their work, he wouldn't have that wealth, right? Because yes, he invented the product, he invented the idea of having an online store, but if it weren't for those employees that are picking up the merchandise and sorting out the packages and sending those packages, if it weren't for those employees, he wouldn't have the amount of wealth that he has, you know? And the least he could do is treat his employees well, but he doesn't. But anyway, this is me going on a tangent about the extremes of capitalism, right? And that is the extremes of capitalism where wealth is concentrated in a small group of people, and then the rest of the people don't have enough money to get by or enough resources to get by because the 1% or the wealthy billionaires, and we're going to have a trillionaire pretty soon, they all have control of those resources, and so the rest of the population doesn't have access to those resources, and those who live in regions that lack agriculture, like if you live up in Alaska or you live somewhere in North Dakota and there's only one industry in the whole state, or one or two industries that you can work in, and they only pay a certain amount of wage, like let's say for that region they pay $12 or $13, and nowadays you can't get by with that kind of money. I mean, before, maybe 60, 70, 80 years ago, you could if you were earning that, but in today's society, you can't get by, and you're forced into this position where you have to be an obedient worker and accept the injustices, right? And anyway, this goes back to the idea of no one being indispensable in a career. So since no one is indispensable, since no one is absolutely necessary, because they could just dispose you and replace you with someone else, and that is the truth, that is what this way of governance has morphed into. Because you're replaceable, so to speak, don't bear your life on your career. Remember to have a life outside of your career. And although your career takes up most of your time and most of your life, because you're there 8 hours a day, or depending how many hours you work, but you're doing that for 8 hours a day, and it's a big chunk of your life, right? But if your company doesn't care about you and your organization doesn't care about you, sometimes it's really hard to leave because you need the money. But don't get involved in the drama. Don't get involved in the company so much that you forget who you are, and you kind of become like a cult follower, because you start your job becomes your identity, kind of thing. And it shouldn't be. You should discover something outside of your job, outside of your education, and discover who you really are without those things. What makes you you? Are you an athletic person? Do you want to learn a new hobby? What makes you happy? Like, what makes your heart dance? What makes you feel free? And so find who you are outside of your career, because your career can dump you at any second, at any time, right? Because that's the reality that we live in. And I'm not saying, oh, let's do a revolution, because honestly, as long as you're aware about what's going on, and you're aware of certain illusions that keep you as like this cog in a machine, as long as you're aware of like the most common illusions, I think there's an endless amount of illusions, and I still have illusions that I'm trying to even find within my own self that I may not be aware of right now, because I'm just so blinded by those illusions. But as long as you know the big ones, that you are not your career and that's not your identity, and also you are not your political affiliation and that's not your identity, and I could go on with or you are not your university, or what university you went to, or football team, that's not your identity, and some people just become these little cult followers, right? And it's good to have a passion, it's good to be passionate about something, but when you make that your identity, when you make that who you are, that thing define who you are, then that's where the problem arises, or so I think that's where it arises. These are just my opinions. So, yeah, what I'm trying to say is that I'm not saying let's overthrow the system, let's do a revolution, or any of that, you know. But as long as you're awake and you know that these things that you identify with don't matter in the grand scheme of things, that what matters is how you lived your life, the quality of your life. Did you really live your life? And it could be that you work in a job for 40 years, the same job for 40 years. But you could still have lived, you could have worked really hard in that company, but you still could have actually lived your life still, if that makes sense. So some people make their job their whole focus in their lives, and they forget to live. And some people, they work and they focus on work and know that that's part of life, but they also live on the side. And that's what I'm saying. Find your life outside of work, outside of these things that you identify with. Who are you? Because remember, these things can dump you at any one moment, right? Even life can dump you. You're dead. And so you just have to find yourself, live your life. And you can still live your life while working. You don't have to quit or move, but if you want to and you really feel like that's right, then that's a good decision for you. But if you feel like you can't do that, or you're not in the position to do that, that's fine. But as long as you're living your life and being present and just realizing that this is all a game and it's part of the game. You can't skip this part, you know. You just gotta learn to live with it and learn to see the dance and the joy within the mundane. So I hope you're having a good day. I hope you have a good life, and I wish you all the best. Peace and love. Bye.